I am the law. Welcome to Dredd 3D, our new review. I'm Cormac Duff.
Oh, I'm Isadora. Got distracted for a second. It's a day.
And what movie we're reviewing today?
Dredd, which is actually one of my favorite movies, and I convinced you to watch it again with me, and it was way more violent than I remember it being.
Exactly. The 1995 Sylvester Stallone classic flop, Judge Dredd.
Yeah, no, the whatever 2010-ish thingamabobber movie with Carl Urban, who is like chef's kiss, a fantastic actor.
This is 2012. Perfect. So if someone's never heard of Judge Dredd before, how would you explain it to them, Isadora?
Honestly,
Yeah.
like very honestly, police brutality, the movie.
That is a very good point, and we'll get more into that later. So just to give you a little bit of background about Judge Dredd from people who don't know it, it is a 2012 science fiction action thriller starring Carl Urban, set in a post-apocalyptic future where people live in these big mega cities. So to give you a bit of background for Dredd, I think Dredd starts off with Dirty Harry, which came out in 1971, which is like the ultimate loose cannon cop. What do you think of Dirty Harry, Isadora?
Problematic.
Why problematic? So if people don't know,
Well,
Isadora used to live in the Bay Area, so she knows the Zodiac Killer quite well. And
yeah,
you
obviously.
said you met Ted Cruz before.
I've never met Ted Cruz before, but yeah, I do pick up that he's a Zodiac killer. I do pick up the hints he'd be dropping. But in all fairness, like I think my issue with Dirty Harry, Dredd, like all these movies, like they're very good. Like
Mm,
I loved Dredd as a movie. Just that rewatching it, like when I watched it in 2012, I was like, ooh, like really good, well-paced action movie with fantastic effects. But nowadays, I kind of realize, oh, like while the premise in science fiction is very cool and Dredd itself is quite cool, um, there are some inherently problematic things with having officers who are inherently above the law. And
mm,
in Dredd, like that is part of their mandate. They
mm.
actually are judge, jury, and executioner. Like that is the point of their office because all these mega cities unfortunately are overrun with violence.
Yeah, yeah. So like with Dirty Harry, I think he came from the crime wave of the 1960s, and people saw cops as like ineffectual and that there were these, kind of red tape that were holding them from giving real justice. So Dirty Harry at the time was massively popular. It was a huge hit because it was it was like a wish fulfillment fantasy, you know? It was the idea that this cop would come along, he'd break the rules, he'd have a big gun, he'd like, brutalize criminals, and that's what people wanted. Um, and like I don't know how much of that comes from like actual fear about urban crime and how much comes from it from like latent racism because of the end of redlining and the civil rights movement and like the white flight from the suburbs.
You know, upon rewatching Dredd, with like all the knowledge I have about like socioeconomic issues in the United States and stuff, I had like if you had asked like 15-year-old me, like, do I find the Judge Dredd comics problematic? I would have said no. But
Mm,
nowadays I'm like, yeah, there is something. I mean, to be fair, they did have like officers shown who were of different ethnicities, but
hmm.
nonetheless, like the movie is primarily a white woman and a white man with a mandate to kill whoever they believe is like going against the law.
Yeah, like I think they made a conscious effort of like having a lot of the extras and secondary characters to be a mixture of race. So it wasn't like there's a bunch of white officers going in to brutalize a bunch of like black citizens. But at the same time, like you said, everyone who had like any more than five lines and any degree of power was a white character,
And I hate
which is
being this person. Like, I mean, not like I hate being this person because obviously it's good to know these things, but it was one of those things where like I love Carl Urban as an actor and I really did enjoy the Dredd comics as a child. So looking back on it and looking back on this movie and realizing like some of the implications that the movie has,
mm,
um even if we disregard like the fact that the two main judges are white, I think just the implication that not even the implication but the mandate that the judges have that they can be the executioner with no standing trial.
Mm.
Like, that's actually terrifying to me nowadays. Like, as a teenager, the concept of Judge Dredd seems so cool, and nowadays I'm like, that is terrifying that, like, a cop
Yeah.
could have a legal mandate to just kill you.
Yeah, I felt really uncomfortable when the scenes where he like basically tortures a black criminal to get information about his boss. Like in the wake of the George Floyd killings of Black Lives Matter, it just seems very uncomfortable. I'm not sure it would get made now. I think that's the one thing that's kind of dated it most badly. But like to go back to the roots of it, like Judge Dredd was a satire, like it was a British comic. It wasn't like,
Mhm.
American Marvel or DC comic. And it was a satire that what if you took this Dirty Harry thing where this cop who doesn't play by the rules and just, shoots from the hip and shoots who he likes. What if you took that to its logical extreme? A cop literally would be judge, jury, and executioner. It'd be giving out like death sentences on the street and it would be perfectly legal. So I think they took that kind of, gung ho American mentality, and they're like, yes, this is what it leads towards. And we have had like an epidemic of police violence, and obviously it's occurred for decades, but it's just a lot more visible now with camera phones. Um, so like I'd say probably the comic books had more kind of a sly kind of humor to them, and I'm sure the like it's a British writer as well, so I'm sure he kind of had a kind of satirical undertone as well. But I think a lot of that is lost in the film itself. Like the film plays it pretty straight.
Yeah. Oh, also, we should. But I know that we're going into all this commentary, but we should also explain like what the movie actually entails. So
Yeah.
basically, the entire premise of the movie begins with
Mm,
Judge Dredd being assigned a rookie who is a
mm,
psychic because there are now mutants in these mega cities. There's like a small percentage of people who are mutants, and she's a very powerful mind reader.
yeah.
And she unfortunately is completely inept at actually being a judge.
It's
But
her first day.
but her powers are so good that they
Mm.
want to pass her so badly that they're like, please take her for a test run because we would really like her to pass somehow, please.
This sounds like you in medical school.
Rude! Rude! Jesus Christ, rude!
This
I am
is so,
brilliant.
this is so
I'm
hard.
I am underappreciated in this relationship. Jesus, mean. Okay. This is how you want to do it, eh? Okay. Okay. So basically, we have a new drug, and there's you suck. Okay, we have a
Yeah,
new drug
the joke's called
in.
slow mo.
Yes, we have a drug which leaves some really awesome special effects because whenever someone takes it, the camera does go into this really beautiful visual artistic multicolored slow-mo. I like that it's a action movie that's rated R but is extremely bright. I feel like
Yes,
nowadays.
that's one of the things I really enjoyed. Like most action movies and video games, especially from this era, were like really kind of, dark and gothic and grim dark and like the colors completely taken away. This one feels like it's like there's splashes of paint everywhere. It's extremely colorful. And whenever we do these slow-mo scenes where it's this new illicit drug that gives you a pleasurable effect and also dilates time, slows down time down to 1% of its real value. So you experience everything in real slow motion. Um, like the camera, it's kind of like a saturation filter on your if you're taking an Instagram photo, so everything appears like even more kind of bright and vivid than elsewhere, and it's an incredible effect, and like the white light refracts and stuff. I don't know exactly how they did it, but it makes the action scenes look absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, all commentary I might have about the movie is that it is actually a very beautiful movie. In the sense of the art direction, I thought that was exceedingly impressive, and it
Yeah.
actually makes me like a part of. I really wanted a Dread 2, like I did really want a Dread 2 back in 2012. But a part of me is happy that they didn't do it because I do not know how they would have beat the visual effects of this movie. Like I found the visual effects extremely unique and cutting edge, and I do not think the movie could have repeated it.
Yeah, I think if Dread 2 came out in like 2015, 2016, it would have been less of a revelation. And certainly if it came out now, I think the rest of the world has caught up with it. Um, but yeah, it's the kind of future that it paints. It has elements that are dated, but elements that are quite relevant. So elements that are dated, the Judge Dredd comic initially came out in the 1970s, and there's obviously massive fear about nuclear war at the time. And like you
Mm.
said, the character of Anderson, who's his kind of rookie sidekick, is is like a mutant, and her mutant ability, instead of just having like an extra arm or something, or having cancer, which is most likely with a mutation, is that she's has psychic ability. So there's kind of fear about nuclear warfare, and most of the world's population has been destroyed by nuclear warfare, which has dated. But there's also a fear of, and like the Malthusian catastrophe as well. There's a big metropolis that they live in called Mega City One, where like 800 million people used to live there, and then there's nuclear warfare, and now it's much less. But then also that the living standard's really low because loads of jobs have been automated by drones and machines and stuff. So people just live in these big slums, like these big blocks, and that's where most of the film takes place, essentially one giant apartment block. Like I think that part has dated really well because if anything, we're closer now to all these jobs being automated and for people's living standards going down. Like maybe Andrew Yang is right, maybe this is the future where we all like live in, dire poverty, just ordering stuff from Amazon and staying in our apartments.
I mean, valid. But I do think I do find really interesting that the movie actually does basically take place all in one location. It takes place in one gigantic, like
Yeah.
100 floor, basically apartment building block that has everything in it, including a medical center. And we
Yeah.
have our villainess,
Yeah.
our main antag, who's
It's
my base, Cersei.
Yes. So the film is incredibly focused. So it's like a Greek tragedy, this unity of action, time, and place. So this movie is only like 96 minutes long, and it's coming out on
It was
Netflix soon.
so
And
good for
it's
96 minutes.
so focused. It's a lot like The Raid, where the entire movie takes place essentially in one location, like one
Mm,
building across separate floors.
and in one
And like
day.
as the film goes, in one day, yeah, exactly. And there's no subplots. Like there's no thing where it's like, oh, we've got to save this baby who's like stuck on floor 11, or this insulin-dependent diabetic woman who needs her shot. It's like we need to destroy the villain, and this is how we're going to do it. And it shows like incredible focus, and it is one of the he's probably the best science fiction. I think one of the reasons it's so good is as the best science fiction writer going writing it. Do you have any idea who wrote this film, Isadora?
No, please tell me.
Alex Garland.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it
Cool.
makes sense. He's British, it's sci-fi, and has a cameo or it's like a small role by Donald Gleason.
Oh yeah, Donald Gleason's in this. Completely
Yeah.
forgot for a second. Donald Gleason's role is like unnecessary. He is literally just there. I don't know why Donald Gleason's there. His role has no necessity in the movie.
So if people don't know, Alex Garland is an incredibly talented writer and director who rose to fame writing 28 Days Later, the zombie thriller with Cillian Murphy, and has also kind of made his name by writing and directing science fiction pieces like Ex Machina, Devs, Annihilation, and he wrote this film. Um, and we've mentioned Carl Urban, who you might recognize from Star Trek. He plays Bones the Doctor, plays Dredd. Um, and Lena Headey, who plays Cersei in Game of Thrones, plays Mama, so our
She
villain.
was amazing in this. Like
She
fair play to Lena Headey because the woman can play villains.
she is so good. Do you know she was cast in this before Game of Thrones ever premiered?
I did not. I actually assumed that she got the film role because of Game of Thrones.
No, no. The Game of Thrones, I think it shot its pilot at this stage, but like no one had seen anything, and the pilot was awful. So, at this stage, she was most famous for being the Queen in 300. So, Jesus, if you was to pick
Damn.
any actress in 2012 and be like, I'm gonna choose this person to be like a former sex worker who like turns crime kingpin, like you could not have done better, Lena Headey. She's amazing in it.
Fair play. She is terrifying. And what I do appreciate, like, I know that we always applaud, like, traditionally attractive women when they get, like, unattractive for a film role, but I will say, like, for someone who I remember when I saw the first season of Game of Thrones, I thought she was like one of the most beautiful women I'd ever seen when she was Cersei. Like back when she had like the
Mhm,
exceptionally long, like glamorous hair and stuff. I was like,
mhm.
she is gorgeous, she's beautiful. Like before you figure out that she's terrifying.
Yeah.
Um, and in this movie, like she legit just like striked fear from like the second she came in with like her choppy short hair. She was just like, and they gave her like a scar, and she just was scary, like really
Yeah.
pretty but terrifying.
Yeah. She is so good in this film. So she plays like a former sex worker who was like brutalized by her pimp, left with scars, and like then she enacts her revenge on him by like feminizing him, which they leave they leave to the imagination. And then she runs a kind of crime gang that takes up this whole tower block, 50,000 people, and she is like incredible in the film. Like she doesn't play it over the top. She doesn't like, like scream at people, but she is just terrifying. You get the impression that no one would cross her. And I don't think it's like, trying to be like ultra feminist, be like, yes, girl, women can do it too. It's basically like she's just a terrifying person who happens to be a woman.
Yeah, I actually did appreciate that. Like in their intro, it was like relevant that she was like a female because
Mm.
she, like, you know what I mean? Because she's like called Mama and all this stuff, and her backstory and everything. But then, like, I don't know. I feel like with a lot of female villains, like the fact that they're a woman becomes like an active discussion at some point in the
Mm.
movie or something. But in
Yeah.
this, it didn't. She was just a badass. Like the entire time, she was like, "I am going to murder stab you," and that's her entire personality.
Yeah.
I'm going to murder stab you. I've come to murder stab everyone who here would like to get murder stabbed today.
Yeah, and like she runs the crime family so well. Like when the judges get trapped inside and they lose communication with the outside world, she's like, "We've got to kill them, but we've got to kill them with like bullets, and not like we've got to make it look like they came in and they were just shot and they were trying to arrest someone." Like there's a cool, calm logic to what she's doing. You're like, this is someone who'd run a kingpin or run a crime organization.
Yeah,
Someone who'd be a sociopath, but
he's a
also have this
student.
like efficiency and have this dedication. I feel the female characters in this film were quite incredibly well written and well acted. So both Lena Headey and Anderson, who's the kind of rookie cop played by Olivia Thirley, like in any other film, they would have been like, oh, let's throw in like a subplot, or let's like have the villain try to like seduce the main character. But they just don't do that here. They're women, but they're also like extremely competent in the case of Lena Headey, or just a rookie on their first day, a la Training Day with Olivia Thirley.
Like this probably shouldn't be so revolutionary, but yeah, the fact that like there are a few moments in which like the fact that the rookie is a female is relevant because, for example, when she's carrying around the like second in command or like third in command criminal who they've captured from Lena
Hmm.
Headey's squad, like he definitely keeps trying to make her uncomfortable due to the fact that she's a woman and he's like a far bigger like man than her, and he's
Hmm.
like, if I wasn't in chains, like,
Yeah.
um, but other than that,
Well, I
like,
mean, I think he's trying to intimidate her and he's trying to take like the
yeah.
threat of sexual violence. Like I don't, it's never like, oh, she can't hold a gun because she's a
Oh
woman.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, other than those moments in which, like, which to be fair, weren't that many in which like she was being like physically threatened by like a bigger, taller man.
Mm-hmm.
I like that they were never like overly sexualized. Like they are two like gorgeous females, and they were given the action heroine treatment that they like deserved. You know what I mean? They were just badass, and it was okay for them to be badass. And at no point did anyone go like, "Oh, like you're too pretty to like do this," or at no point did they like struggle with like a gun or struggle to be kick ass or you know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And they didn't like need a scene where they like, put down a man to show that they're strong, to show that they're a great woman. They're just like strong in their own right. Um, and
Actually,
it's like, yes, go
oh,
ahead. Yeah.
sorry, I just want to say I really appreciated Anderson because she also showcased like the issues with being a judge. Like at one point she I mean, spoilers obviously if you're watching this. She murders like one of the men. Well, I mean like not murders per se because he was
She
in an attack.
executes like
Yeah.
like
She like Dredd says like, he tried to kill us. This is against the law. Execute him. It's like your training rookie. She
yeah.
executes him. Later she discovers that he was someone's husband, and and like the woman who like lets him into the apartment has like a child with her, and Anderson feels like genuinely troubled by the fact that she did something like that. And I actually thought that was good because I think that if we
Mm,
just had Judge Dredd in the movie, there wouldn't be as many implications about the issues of being a judge. But with
yeah.
Anderson there, we can actually kind of be like, oh wait, it actually is really bad that you can be
Yeah.
both judge and executioner.
Yeah, I think Anderson is like the audience surrogate, where she's come into the system, and as she's in it, she's like, "This is a really problematic system." And by the end, she's like willing to leave it. Spoiler: she's willing to leave it. Like it's a little bit like Training Day, where she's become disillusioned with it. Um, and Dredd has also like gone through his own character arc. He's like, maybe this whole system isn't, exactly perfect. Like maybe my system of just brutalizing criminals isn't the way to get things done. Like there might be a third path.
Maybe I will say I don't know if Dredd actually, like in my opinion from the movie, I don't know if Dredd changes like that much.
I,
However,
I don't think he changes his view on the system, but he definitely changes his view that like the law is the law, rules are rules. Like I think he definitely bends his rules towards the end for
yeah,
her.
because he bent his rule for Anderson because she wasn't supposed to have passed. Because
Yeah,
there is a rule stating that if your primary weapon is taken away from you, you fail your trial. And
yeah,
Anderson got her gun taken away from her,
yeah, yeah.
so she should have failed. And Dredd like made the exception and didn't tell anyone. Which, to be fair, is definitely like a character arc, but it's not. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think that, like Anderson, he's gonna be rolling around his bike being like,
No, I
perhaps I
mean,
should not
he,
brutalize anyone
he
today.
still needs to be Dredd for the sequel, but I would say that he's changed slightly through the film. Like it's a minimal arc, but it is a character arc all the same.
Mm.
Like the world changes him rather than him changing the world.
I also do think that, like, in terms of being willing to bend things, I think in the movie, when we're shown that there are bad judges or like judges that are easily bribed into doing
Yeah,
very evil things,
yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
I think that also made Dredd realize that, like, they probably needed good judges out there, and
yeah.
Anderson was probably the best good judge they were gonna get anytime soon.
Yeah, that's it. Like you do need good judges, and it also shows them like the system is. I think he realized to some degree the system's problematic if the judges have total power, but they're humans and humans can be corrupted, and like that's what happens too. Like I think at the end of the film we're meant to think like, oh, I'd love to watch Dredd too, but also in the same way that you watch Jurassic Park and you're supposed to think maybe Jurassic Park isn't a good idea. I think you're supposed to come out of this film thinking maybe like the whole Dredd judge, jury, and executioner cop system is not a good idea either.
Yeah, but also one of the things that I actually thought was really terrifying about being a judge is that in the beginning of the movie when they're talking about Anderson, they say something really quickly like, she's an orphan, so by protocol she was raised in the academy from like a young age to be a judge, and I'm like, are you guys literally brainwashing children to be like problematic future cops? Is that
It
what's
seems
happening in this
like
movie?
it seems like
Problematic
some sort
future
of
cops.
it seems like some sort of dystopian Brave New World with like a lot of kind of institutional like homes. Yeah, no, it's a problematic system, and I think Carl Urban as well is under appreciated. Like he plays the role kind of very straight. He's always got like a scowl on his face. Like if anyone
I
else has
was
seen the
so
movie, like
impressed by his
Dredd has like a
constant
visor over
growth.
the top half of his face, so he's only acting with like essentially his nose and mouth, and he's always got a scowl
And he
like.
never takes off the mask.
He never takes off the mask. Yeah, in when they made a film out of this with Sylvester Stallone in the mid 90s, and Stallone takes off the mask all the time because they're like, oh, we need a good Stallone on screen, you know. Like Dredd never takes off the mask. There's not even a scene like the Mandalorian where he gets injured and he has to take off the mask. He never
Yeah,
takes it off. It's
in
amazing.
The Mandalorian, he's straight up like a part of a cult that can't take off his mask, and yet one episode a season, The Mandalorian like definitely takes off his mask,
I
and
I
yet
think
we have
I think that's
Dredd.
I think that's in his contract so he can get an Emmy. I've said before if he wants to get an
Yeah,
Emmy nomination for Best Actor, he needs to take off his mask because there's some inane rule that you can't be a masked figure like a luchador if you want to get an Emmy nomination.
no, but
Um,
straight up, I thought it was so cool that Carl Urban like acted with the mask on the whole time. Like I,
it
I
was
always,
so difficult. Like
I always
like I
appreciated.
I can barely make out someone's facial expressions with like coronavirus masks on. Like, and this guy's like the opposite. He doesn't even have his eyes. He just has his like lower mouth. He's like, I've got to give all my expression through that. I know he's not that emotive character, but even still,
I thought it was really impressive. Like, I think a lot of actors wouldn't be willing to do that or like
no.
open to doing it. And I just think it really demonstrates that Carl Urban, in my opinion, is an aggressively underappreciated actor. I think he's really good.
Are you
Particularly think
are you
he's great in The Boys,
are
which
are you?
you won't see, but is
I,
really good.
I thought you skipped past all the scene in The Boys. You've just watched the superhero scenes. You
I
don't watch.
occasionally watch the Carl Urban scenes. He's like the only non-superpowered human that's worthwhile in The Boys. No, to be fair, there's one really kick-ass like female in like the boys team who's really cool as well. But it's like, to be fair, it's literally her and Carl Urban carrying like the goodies.
Yeah, I think the baddies are far more in the boys from what I heard are far more entertaining. But so Carl Urban is a great choice. Sylvester Stallone, by contrast, was a terrible choice in 1995. So I think he was clearly given the role because Demolition Man had come out 2 years earlier, which is similarly, um, Stallone in kind of a futuristic utopian slash dystopian worlds, like fighting crime. But whereas Demolition Man was a really clever social satire that stated really well. Like his Judge Dredd film was just like a kind of boring like revenge thriller, which is dated terribly. And
Mm-hmm.
also, he was the worst choice in the world of any actor for playing Dredd. Do you have any idea why?
Because he can't emote properly to save his life.
And specifically with the bottom half of his face.
Oh, is it because he has like a gigantic bottom half of his face, or?
No, so he has. If you look at his face, if you look at the left side of his face, he can't move it. If you look at him when he smiles, his smile is asymmetrical. So, when Sylvester Stallone was born, there were difficulties with the delivery. So the obstetricians at the time used forceps to get him out.
Mhm.
They have to have like two pulls with forceps. So when they grabbed him, the forceps compressed his facial nerve and left him with permanent damage to the left lower half of his face. So he has decreased kind of sensory and motor movements of his lower jaw, of his mouth, of his tongue. So that's what gives him a slurred speech. So when you hear Sylvester Stallone talk like this, it's because he can't move his tongue properly because he got no innervation on the left side. Like that's why he's got like such a distinctive voice. And
Is
also
that
why
I actually thought it was his accent. Like this entire time I thought that it was to be fair, he pulls it off really well. Like the man has made a career from an exceptionally distinctive
yeah, and it is a very
voice.
distinctive voice. But like again, he was a worse choice because if you got Judge Dredd, you're only acting with a quarter of your face. Or say you're only acting with the lower half of your face. But now it's Stallone, he doesn't have like a quarter of that. So he's acting with like a quarter of his face, essentially the right bottom quarter of his face. So he was the worst choice for Dredd. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. When I was in RCSI, I said that to Clive Lee, our anatomy demonstrator, and he was like, "Oh, that is interesting," when he's talking about Bell's palsy.
Huh. I
Yeah.
mean, it's fascinating. Like fair play for him because obviously, like making a career when you have a kind of like issue on a section of your face, particularly considering how famous he is, like
Mm.
exceptionally impressive. And to be fair, like he's made millions on that accent. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
But I can understand why it would be very difficult, like position to put an actor that way. Like Carl Urban obviously has to try very hard to
Mm.
emote in that movie, and
Yeah.
I can only imagine how difficult it is if it's only like one quarter of your face that will do like a downward like
Yeah.
grumpy
But I mean,
face.
but I mean, imagine if you got like Nicole Kidman after she's taken a lot of Botox and she's like, for this new role, you can only act with your forehead. Like, it'd be like casting like that. I just think in retrospect it was a terrible choice. But fair play to Stallone and his illustrious career, and fair play to Carl Urban for bringing a lot of credence to the role. Anything you want to add about Dredd?
I just think that overall, considering the fact that it was made in 2012, before we started, to be fair, we had been having very important discussions around the role of police, but I think before it became like an exceptionally mainstream topic, I
Mm,
do think that the movie does a good job of showcasing some of the issues of
yeah.
like cops having the ability to like be judge, jury, and executioner.
Mm,
But I do think that overall it was a very good design for an action movie. Like I
mm,
think that if we if we without like the social commentary, which to be fair is very important, like social implications, social commentary are very important for movies. But I think that if we consider the evolution it's contributed to in action movies, I think that
mm,
it's like a really good and like not even good but like important film because it
mm,
showed that we don't have to have these monocolored dark exceptionally sad movies be the way that we show action movies. They can be bright and multicolored and have all these fantastical shots but yet
mm,
still be exceptionally impactful and honestly terrifying and
mm.
semi-tragic. Like
Yeah.
I forgot how violent this movie was.
It
Also
was
2000.
it's incredibly violent. Like we're so used to watching PG-13 movies now. There's a chase scene at the start, and they like hit it, and the bad guys like hit a pedestrian, and like their window is like completely smashed. And, like there's blood on the window, and I was like, Jesus, like I'm not used to seeing this in a movie. I'm used to like seeing like some old lady jump out of the way carrying a baby.
It's exceptionally graphic. And I watched this when I was like 20 or like
Mm.
19 probably, and I do
Yeah.
not like for some reason I kept pitching it to you. I was like, we need to watch it, we need to watch it, and I completely forgot how violent it was. Like I knew that it was really colorful, but somehow
Mm.
the complete like violence and grotesqueness of some scenes did not
Mm.
I didn't remember it. And fair play to Lena Hadley, who probably played one of the most terrifying villains I've seen in like a long time in a movie. Like I felt genuinely threatened by her presence.
Yeah, she is incredible in Cersei Lannister and equally good in this role. Yeah, it's for me it is like you said, I think especially since 2014 with the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, there's elements of it that haven't dated that well, but it is a commentary on police violence, and I think it ultimately comes with the message that police violence with no oversight is a bad idea. So while it probably wouldn't get made as it is today, I think that its image or its message is overall a kind of positive message that fits in with our values. So Isadora, bop or scam?
I think it is a bop, and I also think that if you read its message about the problematicness of allowing cops to have full power, I do actually think that, particularly for 2012, it was like a surprisingly woke movie for 2012, I feel
Yeah,
like.
I think it's dated incredibly well, so I'm going to give it a Bob as well. Very good film. I've been on a Bob roll. I think I haven't given a scam in like 8 reviews. Um,
No, very
so
strange.
we'll have to review bad movies again soon. Perfect. Anything you want to tell our audience?
Really good action scenes. Just
Okay.
like, I mean, you're gonna have to close your eyes half the time, but other than that, it's a pretty good movie. Unless you're very good with blood. I am not good with that much blood.
Grand. Okie dokie. Well, goodbye everyone, and by everyone I mean Mama Lemego, who's our only listener.
Hi, mommy.